Okay, so you want to own a gas station. Buy the land, put up the canopy, sign with a big oil brand, and watch cars pull in every single day. Here's the first number that should stop you before you go any further. The US convenience and fuel retail industry did $817.5 billion in total sales last year. That's more money moving through gas stations and their attached stores than the GDP of most countries on Earth. And yet, if you looked at what the average station actually keeps after everything is paid for, you'd be looking at 1 to 3% of that number. A rounding error, wearing a canopy, that gap between the giant number rolling through the pumps and the tiny number staying in the owner's pocket is the entire story of this business. Understand that gap and you understand gas stations. Miss it and you'll go broke, owning one of the busiest, most visible, most trusted small businesses on your street corner. Let's start with why anyone gets into this in the first place. There are roughly 152,000 convenience stores in America, and about 80% of all the fuel sold in this country moves through them. Fuel alone accounted for $476 billion of last year's sales. That's an enormous river of cash flowing past a single cash register every single day. But here's the part that surprises almost everyone stepping into this business for the first time. Gasoline is not where the money is. Fuel made up 65% of total sales dollars at the average station last year, but only 38.8% of the actual gross profit. You are selling the highest volume, lowest margin product in American retail, and the fuel pump exists mainly to get a car into your parking lot. Here's the number that should really wake you up. The average gross margin on a gallon of gas last year was about 35.7 cents. Sounds decent. Now subtract credit card processing fees, which run 1.5 to 2.5% of the transaction, subtract labor allocated to that sale, subtract utilities to run the pump, and most operators are left with somewhere between 3 and 7 cents of actual net profit per gallon. On a station moving 4,000 gallons a day, that's somewhere around $150 in daily net fuel profit. You could sell $15,000 worth of gasoline in a single day and walk away with less profit than a single decent dinner rush at a diner next door. So before you spend a single dollar, you need to understand where the real money hides. Food service, the coffee, the hot dogs, the fountain drinks made up only 28.5% of in-store sales last year, but it generated almost 39% of in-store gross profit. Packaged beverages, snacks, and lottery commissions carry markups of 25 to 50%. The convenience store isn't the side business propping up the gas station. The gas station is the traffic generator propping up the convenience store. Now for the number everyone gets wrong before they even open the doors. People assume a gas station is just land, pumps, and a cash register. You can lease an existing site and start operating for as little as $20,000 to $45,000 if you're stepping into an established brand's dealer program. But if you want to build one from the ground up or buy into a major brand's franchise with a convenience store attached, you're looking at anywhere from $250,000 to over $2 million before your first customer ever pulls up. Here's where that money actually goes, and this is the part nobody warns you about. Franchise fees alone can run $25,000 to $100,000 depending on the brand. Land and site development, if you're building new, can swallow the rest of your budget entirely. Then come the underground storage tanks, and this is where new owners usually feel the floor drop out from under them. A basic tank removal runs $15,000 to $20,000 per tank, and that's assuming nothing is leaking. If a tank has been leaking, the average cleanup costs around $130,000, and in the worst cases, where contamination has reached groundwater, that number can climb past $1 million. More than half of the roughly 415,000 underground tanks currently in service in America are over 25 years old, sitting quietly under lots that new owners are about to buy without knowing exactly what's down there. But here's the trap inside the trap. None of what I just listed is the thing that actually kills new gas station owners. It's the fuel itself sitting in the ground, because you don't get fuel on consignment. You buy it from your supplier at the wholesale rack price, pay for it before you've sold a drop, and then sell it slowly over the following days and weeks at whatever the street price happens to be. If wholesale prices drop the day after your delivery truck leaves, you're stuck selling inventory you overpaid for at a loss because every competitor down the street is already pricing off the new, lower rack rate. Owners call this the float, and it silently erases margin in a business that barely has any margin to spare. So let's say you've survived the setup. Now you need something even more important than money. You need a supply agreement, and in America, that relationship is governed by a law most people have never heard of, called the Petroleum Marketing Practices Act, passed in 1978. It exists because before this law, major oil companies could terminate a dealer's franchise on a whim, seize back a station someone had built their entire life around with almost no warning. The act now requires 90 days written notice before a franchisor can terminate or fail to renew your agreement, and in certain cases, it requires them to offer you the right to buy or lease the property first. It sounds protective, and it is. But here's the part that should make you nervous anyway. 90 days is barely enough time to find a new supplier, let alone a new location, if your brand relationship collapses. And it can collapse for reasons that have nothing to do with how well you're running your store. Now, here's a real company, a real name, and a real collapse, because nothing teaches this lesson better than watching it happen to someone who looked completely stable. Meet Getty Petroleum Marketing. At its peak, this company leased and operated around 800 gas stations across the Northeast under recognizable brands, a business built on decades of relationships with dealers who ran the day-to-day counters. In December of 2011, Getty Petroleum Marketing filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, listing between $50 and $100 million in both assets and liabilities. It happened fast, following a rent dispute and an unresolved fight over who was responsible for environmental cleanup at its own properties. Individual station owners, people who had personally paid tens of thousands of dollars in security deposits just to operate under the Getty name, lost that money overnight. One New Jersey operator lost a $58,000 deposit and was then offered a deal by the incoming brand to keep running his own station, but only for a 2% commission on fuel sales, about 7 cents a gallon, while paying an entirely new deposit just for the privilege. He walked away. The lesson isn't that Getty was poorly run by bad people. The lesson is that an owner-operator's entire livelihood can sit downstream of a corporate landlord dispute they had no part in and no warning about. There's a second number quietly determining whether you're even allowed to keep your branded supply agreement, and it's your shrink rate, the percentage of inventory loss to theft, drive-offs, and inventory errors. A healthy station keeps shrink under 1% of sales. Push it past that, whether from employee theft at the register or gas thieves driving off without paying, and your insurer raises your premiums, your fuel supplier starts asking questions, and at scale, your branded agreement becomes harder to renew. It doesn't show up as one dramatic loss. It just quietly erases the same 3 to 7 cents per gallon you were fighting so hard to keep in the first place. Once a company survives all of that and starts adding a second, third, or 10th location, the challenge stops being physical and becomes purely financial. You're now managing multiple fuel deliveries, multiple staffs, multiple sets of environmental compliance paperwork, and a lender watching your cash position across every single site. The largest operators eventually stop just running someone else's brand and start owning the real estate underneath their own stations, capturing both the retail profit and the long-term value of the land and the canopy sitting on it. The median asking price for an established station on the open market right now sits around $450,000 for the business alone. Add the real estate, the tanks, and the canopy, and a turnkey site can run $1.5 million to $5 million, with premium corners in fast-growing states closing north of $4 million. So who actually gets paid at the end of all this, and how much? A small independent owner-operator typically takes home somewhere between $50,000 and $150,000 a year in total personal income. The owner of a well-run, multi-site operation with strong food service and a tight handle on shrink and card fees can clear $300,000 to $500,000 or more annually. Same industry, same pumps, same brand of gasoline sitting underground. The difference between those two outcomes was never the price on the sign out front. It was the discipline behind the register. Now, let's do the math the way any serious owner would, because the two scenario ending is the only honest way to end this conversation. The optimistic scenario. You're running a single station moving 120,000 gallons a month with a solid attached convenience store, pulling in roughly $4 million a year in combined revenue at a healthy blended net margin of around 2.5%. That's $100,000 in profit for the year. Your card fees stayed predictable, your shrink stayed under 1%, and your food service program carried the store the way it's supposed to. Life is good. Now, the realistic scenario. Wholesale fuel prices spike the week after your delivery truck fills your tanks, and you're stuck selling that inventory at a loss for 10 straight days while competitors already priced off the new rack rate undercut you. Your shrink creeps to 1.8% after a summer of drive-offs, and your insurer responds with a premium increase. A routine tank inspection turns up a slow leak, and you're suddenly staring at a $130,000 cleanup bill your insurance only partially covers. Add in the fact that credit and debit card fees alone cost the industry $21.3 billion last year, quietly eating 3 to 5 cents of every gallon you sell before you even see the money. Run that same $4 million a year through that reality, and your 2.5% margin doesn't just shrink. It can flip into an outright loss before you've paid yourself a single dollar in owner salary. You didn't sell worse gasoline in the bad year. You sold the exact same gallons at the exact same pumps. The only thing that changed was which side of a handful of coin flips you happen to land on. So, is owning a gas station worth it? It gives you one of the most visible, most trafficked small businesses in America, contracts, and cash flow measured in numbers that dwarf almost any other storefront business you could start, and the tangible satisfaction of watching the same cars pull into your lot every single morning. But it demands an owner who treats the business less like a fuel retailer and more like a razor-thin logistics operation that happens to sell gasoline. Someone who understands the float, the shrink rate, and the card fee math as fluently as they understand octane ratings. Every number in this script, the thin fuel margins, the underground tank liability, the 90-day notice period buried inside federal law, the drive-off that quietly wrecks your insurance, exists for one reason. It filters out the people who wanted to own a gas station from the people who actually understand what's sitting underneath one. The canopy, the pumps, and the brand sign are the easy part. Anyone with enough starting capital can put those up in a matter of months. What separates the owner who's still standing in year 10 from the one who quietly sells out in year 2 is whether they treated their fuel inventory and their card processing statement with the same seriousness they treated their grand opening banner. The people who thrive in this industry were rarely the ones who picked the best looking corner lot. They were the ones who understood, long before their first delivery truck arrived, that the real business of running a gas station isn't selling gasoline. It's surviving the gap between what's sitting in your tanks and what's actually sitting in your bank account.